Hello and welcome to the Punjabi Mental Health Podcast by Taraki. My name's Sharanjit Singh and I'm the founder and director of Taraki, and I'm really excited to be your host today as we explore the topic of intergenerational trauma and intergenerational wisdom and the impact these things have on our communities with our amazing guests. Before we jump into the conversation with our guests, I just want to explain a bit about Taraki. We were founded in October 2017, and I founded Taraki after my own experiences of mental health challenges, which for me happened when I was moving from being a secondary school student to a university student. I was very lucky at that time to get the help that I needed and support from the people around me. But I noticed that there were plenty of folks within our communities who were going through similar struggles, but weren't able to access that type of support. And so now we work to reshape approaches to mental health with Punjabi communities, focusing on things like awareness, education, peer support and research. And I think this conversation that we're about to have today is a nice way of building that awareness and also implementing and developing the skills that we might have as well. So really quickly, we're really lucky today to have a panel from a whole host of different sectors, life experiences, parts of the country, and people who are doing amazing work in our communities in various ways. And we'll hear more about what our panelists do in their work as we go on. But we've got Rav, who is in the creative space, Sadish, who's in the charity space, Inda, who's in the sports space, and Bal, who's also in the creative space as well. But as we've done in the Punjabi Mental Health Podcast before, we like to start with a really serious question. It's a question that cuts through to the essence of our communities, right? What is your favorite type of paratha? And look, you're all sat down, we're all here. I don't want us to fight. All right? But I'm going to open that out, and Sadish, we'll start with you and we'll go this way.
So I have to say it's mine and my children as well, it's theirs as well. It has to be aloo gobi paratha, but not the grated type. When they grate the raw cauliflower and make it like that. It's aloo gobi di sabji that's cooked the night before, and then the next day you mash it up and you put two rotiyan together and you put it into filling and then you cook it like them.
So good. That's the first time someone's paratha answer has got a round of applause.
I don't think my answer is going to be as lavish as that, but I'd have to say mulli wala paratha, 1,000,000%. He knows.
Has it always been mulli wala paratha?
It's not really common. It used to be aloo because that's like the most common paratha. But I think as my taste buds have gotten a bit exquisite, I think I have to say mulli wala paratha.
Exquisite taste buds, I like it.
Mine's an aloo wala paratha for definite. It's kind of like, there's those memes that you get where any form of potato is like the best thing ever, and I think a paratha is the same. But recently I found out that paneer paratha exists as well, with like great paneer in there, and they bang, so yeah.
Beautiful. Bal?
So I'm celiac, which means I have a gluten intolerance. I was only diagnosed like 6 years ago. So growing up, I didn't like roti, I didn't like paratha, and oh my God, that never went down well with my mum. So it's just, I just couldn't, and which is a bit of a shame. So I don't have a favourite, unfortunately.
Can we make a paratha from rice?
You can try.
If you flatten it, we'll try.
Let's do that. We'll give that a go. Fantastic. Yeah, I love rice.
No, thank you all. Actually, that's the end of the podcast, so we're done. But kind of coming back to the topic, today's topic, it's not an easy conversation within our communities. It's heavy, but also hopefully one that inspires a bit of hope and a bit of optimism for the future. And it's talking about intergenerational trauma and intergenerational wisdom. So just to give a bit of context, obviously our panelists are very understanding of this topic. But for those who might not know, intergenerational trauma refers to trauma or challenges that is passed from a survivor to their descendants. So people experiencing intergenerational trauma may go through symptoms, reactions, patterns, and emotional effects from trauma that's actually been experienced by previous generations. And within our communities, We've been through huge changes over different generations, including migration, subjugation, discrimination. And this is a really important topic, I think, when we're thinking about our communities. But alongside this, we also need to think about intergenerational wisdom. Because I don't want to be here talking about all the things that previous generations have done wrong, when in fact, actually, we need to also think about what we can learn positively from previous generations. And when we say intergenerational wisdom, it can be described as the sharing and the transmission of knowledge, beliefs, and experiences from one generation to the next, including the transmission of hope, of strength, of resilience, which potentially can be used to help break cycles of trauma that communities experience. So it's a big topic, and I think the first thing I just want to ask is, what immediately came to your minds when you heard that topic? Because it's not something that's often spoken about in our communities.
Alcoholism. On a personal level, I was lucky that my parents, my immediate family, not very big drinkers, but something that I think that is very relevant in the Punjabi community is alcohol and the effects that it has on the youngsters in particular. It's very, very damaging. I work with kids at the Gurdwara. We see that sometimes the kids, that 1 hour in the Gurdwara, 1.5 hours in the Gurdwara for them is like a break, not from school or anything else sometimes, but just from their house. Do you know what I mean? And again, there's many other factors, a million other things, but alcohol, I believe, in our community is such a damaging thing, but it's so normal that we just can't get away from it. And I think it's not to say that everybody drinks is a bad person. I just think that a lot of our parents, grandparents, being away from home, working hard, not being alienated from their actual family, from their homeland, I believe it's had devastating effects on our community. And our parents or that generation or they're older, they don't quite realise why they do it or why it's affected them so much, because they didn't have the luxury to kind of educate themselves on that kind of thing. But the continuation of it in our youngsters, I believe, is very bad, because a lot of problems that we don't face the same problems our parents did, but come from alcohol or the excessiveness of alcohol.
I think for me, it's those societal expectations. So growing up, constantly being told, if you do this, what will people think? If you behave in this way, what will people... It's just constant thinking about society and anything that you do, but what will people think? And I think as I've grown up, I do think now, who are these people? But growing up, it caused almost like a bit of an internal malfunction, and it breeds this imposter syndrome, which you're living with it, and I'm still trying to almost overcome that and try to be the person that I am and who I'm supposed to be without constantly feeling like I'm judged and people are thinking something. I think that's probably one of the first things that came to my mind.
Thank you both. Anyone else?
Yeah, I think for me, I was quite excited about this when you invited me onto it, first of all, because I think for me there's this conversation about historically where our parents came from, and there's the trauma that they brought with them going back to like the times of partition. So my granddad, for example, he talked to obviously my dad about what happened, how they were forced to leave, their home, their land, and so on. And that gets passed down because of the attitude then and this animosity that when they came here that existed between communities and so on. And that now third generation in schools and, in playgrounds, it's still playing out. So it's something we talk about at home. I do talk to my boys about it quite a bit, because I think that's one of the most important things, that because nobody talked about it, it existed, but there were no conversations about it. We never understood. You wouldn't believe that even after all these years, literally only a few months ago, my dad told us a story about how my granddad received a letter during partition where he was told that if he stayed where he was, he had to go to the mosque 5 times a day and pray and so on. And it was a friend of his that gave him that letter during partition. We never knew that story, and it was only because we were talking about the Sunny Deol's film, that it came up because he'd heard us talking about the film. And anyway, so there's that element. So it's really important to talk to children about it, to understand where some of that trauma might be coming from, because sometimes we can pass it on without realising. And then the other element of this is, for me, is my work. So I've worked in the domestic abuse sector now for 27 years, and I run Sikh Women's Aid. So Sikh Women's Aid is domestic and sexual abuse support service. Now, because I've done it for so long, for example, there's a woman that I've worked with many, many years ago, and she's still accessing support. She's in her 60s now. But not only that, she's asking for help for her daughter, who's also now married and is experiencing exactly the same thing. So, you know, it's become so normalised, this trauma, is that, you know, people have not learnt how to be resilient. They haven't learnt how to challenge. Abuse has become normalised. And so if we don't challenge, if we don't sort of fight against it, if we don't, you know, remove ourselves from that situation, it will continue. And the problem is, because we're not talking about it, people aren't learning how to remove themselves and how to get help. So that's some of the work that we're doing, obviously, with families that we're working with.
I'm really glad that you balanced the topic of intergenerational trauma with wisdom, because I think as a product of a lot of intergenerational trauma, it's easy to pinpoint all the bad stuff and just focus on who's to blame, maybe. But I think as I've got older and I've learned a lot about myself, there's a lot that I've brought forward with what I do now, and a lot of that has come from generations before me. So I think it's a good way to balance both of those things out. I learned a word a couple of years ago. It was epigenetics. There was, when Sidhu passed away, there was a vigil in Birmingham, and I believe it was Seek Your Mind that spoke about epigenetics. They only had 5 minutes to speak, but that conversation has stuck with me forever, and it's kind of about how our DNA is changed by traumatic events in our lineage, and how that carries forward in our behaviours and stuff now that we don't even realise where it's come from. But yeah, and I'm not surprised that Taraki, that you've kind of focused on the wisdom of it as well, with the way that we've got access to communicate from English and back to Punjabi across different age ranges, with age-appropriate education to communicate properly. But yeah, I'm glad that you balanced it with wisdom as well, because I think there's a lot to learn positively as well.
I think there's a whole load of different things, I think, that emerge from some of these conversations. And as we talk and think about previous generations, I think it's also probably is good that we think about how we got where we are, because, you know, we're all sat here in the UK having this conversation, but we all had a journey here, and those journeys would have been different. I know for my family, grandparents moved to Birmingham, you know, in late 1960s. You know, they worked in factories. That was their main kind of focus there. But I think all of us come from slightly different, places in the UK. Our families come from slightly different places. And you know, I'm just thinking, because we all bring different stories, even though we're all here, you know, because we're from Punjabi communities and we connect with our communities in these different ways. But actually there's a uniqueness there. And I think, Sudesh, you were mentioning that your family were from kind of the Bedford area.
Yeah.
How did that happen?
Yeah. So my dad moved to Bedford because we had family there, and then literally, I was born there. But then my taya, my uncle, he was in Letchworth. So for anybody who doesn't know, it's the first garden city in the UK, in Hertfordshire, and very, very white. You know, there were very few Asians there. So as Asians, you sort of stuck together, you know, because there wasn't even a Gurdwara in Letchworth, so we had to go to the next town, which is Hitchin, to go to the Gurdwara. And so, you know, you gel with people that you know, and you sort of are drawn to them, aren't you? You know, you got similar communities, similar beliefs, language, you know, all of those things culturally. But one of the things that I think separated me from a lot of when I was a child, and I think some of my trauma comes from there, which then, you know, as you get older, you have to almost try and fight it as you learn how to, you know, be resilient and challenge that trauma. But for me, it came from things like the caste system, and I didn't even know it existed. My dad's Taraki Singh. We went to the Gurdwara. I learned Punjabi. The minibus used to come and pick us all up. We used to hate going. And it used to come to the top of the road and blow its horn, and we'd have to go. But even with all of that, so we only learnt about Sikhi from my dad, and that's all we knew about and we understood. But it was from kids in primary school that you started learning about these things. And in the end, I had to ask my dad, because, you know, you get called names when you're bullied and things like that. And I had to say to him, what is this? what is that all about? Because these girls keep saying it. And it's hard because my mum worked with their mums. So, you know what I mean? So when my mum heard about it, it's difficult for her too because she thought they were her friends. So these sorts of things play out. And I think what happened as you get older, you get in your own way. You know, you were saying earlier when we were talking outside of the podcast, but about kindness, and you were saying it's about being kind to people. And I say you have to be kind to yourself as well. Because what happens is trauma embeds these imposter syndrome that you were talking about, Bao. Like, you know, it starts to embed the seed and you wonder whether you're good enough or whether you deserve something or whether you should attempt to do something because you are talking to yourself and you're having these conversations and maybe you think you're not worthy or not capable and all of those things. So at some point, you have to get out of your own way and think to yourself, actually, I need to be kind to myself too and believe that I can do things. And as soon as you start having that conversation, you know, really the world opens up. So it's partly a mindset. I'm simplifying it, but actually I learned that because I went through some discrimination in a previous employment and that was really hard for me. I had to take some time off work, a couple of weeks, and I came back and I was like ready to challenge all of it. In the end, they had to apologise, the company did. But in that period and during that sort of the following 6 months or a year, I went and I learned, I listened to podcasts, I watched YouTube, I started going to these events around anxiety or about, you know, around coaching and about NLP. I trained to be an NLP practitioner. I did a coaching qualification and so on. And I learned actually, if you can get your hands on this and sort of really deal with it, you can move past it and you don't have to keep dwelling on it. It still creeps in, but you recognize when it creeps in and then obviously you know how to deal with it and so on. But like it's hard, you know, and there's layers of it. It's not one thing. You know, we're brown, we're Asian, we're Indian, we're Punjabi, we're even Sikh, you know, compared to say other Hindu community, Muslim community, we're different from them. And even in Sikhi there are these this segregation within the community and that makes it hard. You know, you want to be part of something, but then that little niggly thing in your head says, does that other person really see you as one of them or not? Do they see you as something else? But I have to work on that, and I have to do it all the time. But I recognise it when it happens.
And then you went from Letchworth to Handsworth?
Handsworth, I got married.
You went from the garden city
yes.
to a garden city in a different way. It's different stuff growing in Handsworth.
Culture shock.
But it's good. I can say that I'm from Handsworth, so it's all good.
Yeah, no, I did. And then I moved to Birmingham, and I to tell you something, on our wedding day, so I was in the back of the Rolls Royce, as they do, you know, coming to Birmingham. And my husband was in the front with the driver, and they were having this conversation, and they were like, I don't know, I might be doing the...
Sorry, your husband wasn't sat with you?
No, he was in the front, we were in the back, me and my Bobby were in the back. So they were having, I won't name the town because I might offend, but they were like, we can't go this way into Birmingham, into Handsworth, we need to go a different way. So they were taking the longer route. And I was sitting in the back and I was like, what's wrong with this place? Because Letchworth, you can leave your windows open, you know, you can go out shopping and all the rest of it. And I was really confused as to why they were naming these small little towns and like you can't go through it. Obviously, I had gold on and things like that, and that's what they were talking about. So so that's how much of a difference it was coming to Handsworth in Birmingham, of all places. Yeah.
You know you have to say what the town was.
So they were talking about Lozelles at the time.
Oh, just a part of Birmingham. Okay, yeah, first. I'm not gonna counter that. You're all good.
You might have to bleep it out in the podcast.
It's all good.
For anyone that doesn't know, Lozelles is also known as the jungle of Birmingham because it is crazy out there.
Yeah. They were from a garden through Lozelles to another garden.
To another garden, yeah.
So Letchworth to Birmingham and to the Midlands. What about the rest of us?
So my dad was from Singapore. I think he came here when he was 5 or 6, and then they had an arranged marriage, my mum and my dad. So my mum came here when they were to get married, got married, and I came along 3 years after they got married. They got married here in the UK, around West London. I think it was in the West London area. Yeah, so they were in West London. My mum had quite a difficult time coming from India living with in-laws. She suffered an awful lot of trauma, linking back to what you were sort of just talking about, lots of sort of domestic abuse. And then when I came along, it got really bad to the point where my mum's in-laws took me, threw her out. She had to go through court. Didn't see me for the first 4 months of my childhood. And what you said is a really interesting point there, because again, it's something that I've never actually thought about and processed. Like, how has that affected me? Like, haven't had, mums with me for the first 4 months of my life, and went through court, got me. And my parents then, they worked it out. They got together, but we grew up as a separate family. Again, in Southall, and had another sister come along. So I think we've had a good upbringing in that sense, but it was a very close-knit, very community. Strong sort of Indian Sikh community, even the school we went to then. So I went to Derry Meadow again. It was a very, very highly sort of Sikh Indian community there. High school as well. So I think a lot of my first sort of 20 years has been very sort of grew up in the Indian community. And it's funny because I think when you then start to step out more into the corporate world, it's like a different world out there. It really is. I've had very similar experiences when you talk about this caste system. Yes, I've had lots of, because I didn't really agree with that. But one of my big, I guess, sort of one of the things I sort of process now is a bit of this identity crisis a little bit, because it's like you say, there are so many tags. There are so many, we're Indian, we're Sikh, we're British. When we go to India, we're seen as the foreigners. And you come here, you're the Indian. So it's almost like, well, where do you fit in? Like, where do you start to fit in? Because there are so many, there are so many tags and labels that everybody decides to establish. So that's my sort of background.
And I think it's really important there to recognise that actually there are such a variety of different contexts that we all come from. Sometimes it's easy for us to assume that things have been the same just because, we might identify with a similar community, we might kind of have, some overlapping experiences, but actually there's so much diversity within our community. We need to recognise that, not less geographic. So you said West London, right?
Yeah.
I'm from Wolverhampton. You can probably hear the accent. I've lived in the Netherlands as a kid. I've moved to Birmingham a couple of years ago. My backstory, my nana came in the late 70s, I think, or late 60s. And there was a piece of paper unearthed recently by my mama. And it was his passport to the UK. And it was a piece of paper with the edging was cut up a little bit. And it had a date on there that was crossed off. And the bend that he came from and where he was going to live with his sponsor family here because he came first. And then the date was crossed off, and he's passed away a good 20 years ago. And we asked my nanny, who's she's 94 now, and we were like, why is the date crossed off and why is there a later date on the back? And she goes, in Punjabi, she goes, I didn't let him go. She goes, I was too scared to let him go. I was here with 4 kids by myself. God knows where he was going to go. God knows if he was going to come back. So I made him wait a little bit. And so that what that second date was. And the fact that she remembered it is crazy. But then that's how he came. And he came to Smethwick first. And that's when they moved here. And then my mum was born here. And then they've moved their way down to Wolverhampton. So that was his journey here. So my mum is 2nd generation, I'm a 3rd generation. And then my dad's story randomly came out at Christmas randomly. One of the years we were watching some Punjabi podcasts I'd put on. And suddenly the story came out when he'd left Punjab, he'd come through Russia and then Ukraine and then Germany and then to Holland, where he made friends with the police department and got his passport. I don't know if I should be saying this out loud. And then he met my mom. He was already in Holland for a bit, and then we made our way to the UK, to Wolverhampton. So that journey is kind of nuts as well, which is even crazier because he thinks Birmingham was really far, and I'm like, you came from Russia for starters. I don't understand. But that's that backstory.
Sounds like a Netflix.
It's crazy. It's crazy. It's just the way that he reeled all these places off, and I'm like, that's not a normal story for anybody, and it's the first time we've heard this. But I think Wolverhampton, especially, and the Midlands especially, we're so tight knit. For me, it's been a long time that I've been trying to escape that because I can't go somewhere where everybody knows me, or I'm on edge, who knows me or who's there, because I've been brought up in a way where it's like, you can't go out because so-and-so is going to say something, you can't do this because then someone's going to see you and then it's going to come back to us and all that kind of stuff. So that's still very imprinted onto me. But also I've recently realised that actually that's actually a strength that we've got in the Midlands, that everybody knows somebody, everyone's very resourceful, that whole community aspect is still there, people still work together to help each other. Like when my nana came, not only did he help our family come, but everyone from the bend came from my nanny and nana's house. There's so many people that they got help get them married and help set them up and stuff like that. And so,
well, your dad knew the police in Holland.
yeah, like exactly. Yeah. And so, as much as I've been trying to escape all these people who might know who I am because of whose daughter I am or whoever, there are also people that my nana's like changed their lives and the whole reason that they're here, and now all their generations of their family are here as well. But yeah, it's the Midlands there's a special sauce in the Midlands, I think. Like with London, like as much as we love coming here, we love being in the Midlands because it's just a mission to get here, whereas you can get from one end of the Midlands to the end with about half an hour. You bypass like Soho Road and Dudley Road and you're just there. And I can go as far as I want. Like I've met someone here today and someone always knows somebody from Wolverhampton, or there's always someone connected back. And I find that pretty special now as I've got older. But yeah, that's where I'm from.
Yeah, myself, my granddad, he come from India when he was about 16 years old. Back then, obviously, weren't planes. He took he had a ship journey, 30 days, 31 days, he said.
He didn't come through Russia?
No, he didn't come through Russia, man. He took a boat, and he got here when he was 16, Southampton. He said we barely spoke English, we had some money, and we made our way to East London. But they didn't stay. They stayed for a couple of years, but they couldn't really get jobs because he was a Singh. So they had to move to Midlands. That's where they worked in the foundries. But then he come back to London after X amount of years. You know, sometimes you sit and think, like, you know, what did my granddad go through 16 years old? And what was I doing when I was 16? I mean, he wasn't always, sometimes you forget, like, he wasn't always an old man, he wasn't always wise, he wasn't always this version of him that I see today. You know, he was a kid. And I think, like, my little brother, you know, he's 23, but I swear that he's a little baby. and I think that my granddad, like, he's the struggles that he went through and how he survived and the effect that had on him. And maybe he didn't have the luxury to sit and think, you know what, I don't want to go to work today, I'm not feeling too good. But he had to. He had to go work and no one really cared about his feelings. And my mum's from India, so my granddad's obviously come to England, but my dad's born here. My mum's from India, and she told me she's from a share, she's not from the village, she went to private school, you know, she spoke English. But even she said when she come to England, she goes, I hated it. And she had a phone back then, obviously, you know, 28 years ago. But she goes, I used to cry the first couple of years not because I had a hard life, but because I wasn't used to it, I wasn't accustomed to it. So then it gets me thinking, how did my granddad manage? You know what I mean? Like, they used to write letters and they wouldn't know if the letters got there or if they were going to get a reply back, and they'd have to get somebody because they couldn't write Punjabi. Or my granddad, he spoke Urdu because he was born in the Pakistan side of Punjab and then migrated over. But it's just different. And one thing I think that bit of our grandparents, our parents, that we don't always realise is their shattered dreams. You know, my granddad, when he come to England, he used to play kabaddi in the Bend. He used to wrestle. But when he come to England, boxing was like, you know, we had Muhammad Ali, George Foreman, all them guys, and he started boxing, and people didn't really know what he was doing. They was like, what are you doing boxing for? Like, you're here to work, just do your job, to live a normal life. And he's like, you know what, let me try it out. And you know, he was really good. He had a promising career, but he couldn't turn professional, for example, because that luxury wasn't afforded to him. And like you said, you know, your grandma, she was scared that her family's going to get separated. And again, same for my grandparents, same for all of our parents, grandparents, you know, whatever. But we live their dream. They live their dream, through us. You know, my granddad's got a bit of dementia now, but he'll forget a lot of things. But one thing he never forgets is to tell people, you know what, my son's a professional boxer, my grandson's a professional boxer. That one thing is embedded in his heart. But it's because he couldn't realise it, but he sees that I can realise it. And when I boxed for my title in July, you know, the first Sikh in over 25 years to box for a professional title, he said to me, well, he says to my dad, but he didn't know I could hear. He was saying, I feel like my whole life's kamai is kind of come to fruit through my grandson. But it's crazy, like, my granddad had done so much. He was a pradhan at the Gurdwara, you know, 10 years. His whole life he worked, you know, sent money back home, built my family back home, built a family here. But he feels like it was wasted because his dream wasn't to work, you know. We can do that today. I can do boxing, you know, we can do whatever we want. We kind of have that luxury. We're a bit more established, but we should always kind of, not we, but as individuals, I think we should look at our parents, grandparents, see the struggle they went through, and it kind of makes us feel better. And in a way, we have life so easy. We have battles. Everybody has a battle. I'm going through something. You're going through something. Everyone's going through something. But if we put it into context, is it always as bad as we think it is in our own mind? You know, in the Gurbani it says, "Man jeete jag jeet." We conquer our mind. We conquer the world. Sometimes our own mind holds us back so much, and we believe these labels that sometimes people give us. You know, if we, like you said, if we're aware, we have the luxury of education now. We have the luxury of research. You know, sitting here today is a luxury, talking about my experiences. You know, you guys can relate, and you guys will tell me something I can relate. Our parents didn't have that. Our grandparents didn't have that. They didn't have these safe spaces. You know, at the Godda, like I said, I always talk about the kids at the Godda. They changed my life. My dad didn't have a place at the Godda where he could talk to somebody older than him, and just talk to him. Not he wasn't going to get nothing. Like, for example, the 10-year-old kid isn't necessarily going to give me anything, but I was at the kabaddi tournament Sunday at Barking, and one of the kids had a black eye. I said to him, like, what happened? And he was eating ice cream, and it makes me sad. Like, he goes, someone hit me in the face, and I was like, what do you mean someone hit me? He's like, and he's like year 6, I think, or year 7, and year 8 kid punched him in the face, but he can feel like he can talk to me. We was at a kabaddi tournament, so he weren't even at the Godara, but he knows me. He don't know I'm a professional boxer or I'm in there or whatever I am. He just sees me as someone from the Godara that he can speak to, and I'm his friend. And that goes so far. This conversation that we're going to have today, we're having, it will go so far, it will resonate, and it will stay with us, and we'll pick up something, one thing that we learned from each other. You guys might have learned from me, or I will learn from you guys, and it will stay with me for the rest of my life. But that safe space, that bit of knowledge and freedom wasn't awarded to our families. And we should always try and remember that and think that, again, and he's an Afghan kid from a boxing gym. He's an amateur. And he's just come from Afghanistan about 3-4 years ago. But he was telling me again, he come through Europe, I don't know how, like they say donkey, like back of lorries and all that kind of stuff. But he lived in Paris, and he was saying we was on the streets, and every day lorries would come by. He goes, we'd ransack the lorries, see if there's a bit of space there, or we'd go underneath, I don't know how, and he's come to England. But this is now, do you know what I mean? And life's so easy, but we owe our forefathers, as they say, so much that sometimes we overlook it and we just focus on the negatives. And I'm not saying you guys are, I'm just saying we as a community, as a people, like, my dad didn't do this, my dad didn't do that, my mum, whatever, but they didn't know that. They didn't know any better either. You know, I barely know any better, so I can only imagine in a time when knowledge and information was restricted, how tough it must have been for them to just to live a normal life, not do anything special, just to be normal, get a job. And my granddad said he had to, so when he came from India, he was actually, he was a Singh. He wasn't Amritdhar, he was a Singh. But he said I had to cut my hair because they wouldn't give him a job. And that was his whole purpose, like, to come to this country was to actually earn a few quid. And they thought back then we was going to go back, but, you know, it never was like that. But we can do anything we want today. We face our, you know, prejudice and kind of racism and all the other things we face. But what's life without a few trials and tribulations? It makes our journey a bit more worth it when we go to bed knowing that, you know, we've kind of done something today. It makes all the difference.
And I think kind of building on what Inder's mentioned there about the impact of some of these challenges and some of the difficulties that our communities have been through in the past, what would you say is kind of one of the things that stands out to you guys about, you know, we're talking about the difficulties that those in previous generations might have experienced, you know, from different places, different parts of the country, different routes here to the country. What stands out for yourselves as one of the challenging legacies of that?
I mean, I think for me, what Baji was saying is really interesting, that conversation, like, you know, but I think, like, for our parents, what you talked about, like the struggles that they faced, my dad exactly was 14 when he came here. And my mum came over, obviously, when my dad got married. And I think it's a different time, but at the same time, I think, like, that kids today struggle as well. Like, my kids are in their 20s, like, both of them. And I used to, like, think to myself, oh, look, you know, at their age, you know, I had, you know, now I had 2 kids, you know, I had a house to look after, I had to do this, I had to do that. And they've taught me, my children have, in a sense that they've got their own trials and tribulations, which are different to ours. For me, as the eldest daughter, and my dad, like saying to me, like, you know, that I have to protect the family honour, and, you know, tu kade galt kam na kari, don't do anything wrong, don't let me ever lower my pag, you know. I always remember him saying that, because I was 14, and I'll never forget it, and that's why I didn't do anything to challenge him or against him in that sense. But he had his trials and tribulations, he had his difficulties, and I had my own. And then I was seeing, and I thought I did a better job, you know, parenting my children, giving them the freedom that they deserved, and, you know, all of that. But they still had their own trials and tribulations. They still experienced stuff that went on at university, or, you know, my younger son has autism. He was diagnosed, but he went through mainstream school. But you do struggle. If you've got a learning need, you do struggle, don't you? And I always say, like, he's like Superman, because he's managed to get through school, college, university. Now he's working in a career that he chose, you know. But it's not without difficulty, and those difficulties exist on a daily basis sometimes. Racism still exists today, you know. He's an actor. My son is the younger one. He's an actor, and he sometimes plays, where he works, he plays Asian characters and stuff, because that's what the company wants him to do. And just the character itself experiences racism from customers that come in the door, which is crazy, because they think that they can do it. So he'll come home, and because of his autism, he will try and understand where this is coming from. But obviously, how do you understand racism? How do you understand the mindset of a racist? And you can't, and he struggles with that. So, you know, there are lots of things that kids go through, but, you know, one of the things our elders didn't give us was the gift of our voice. I don't think they talked to us about their trials and tribulations. Only now, like I said, it was only like a few months ago, my dad talked about what happened to my granddad. Like, he's never talked about it before. We were like, where's this come from? We should be writing this down. We should be capturing this. But they didn't talk. Men generally don't. And that's why obviously Taraki is really important, because in general, men don't talk about their traumas. Women, historically, even in India, they would have been those women who got together around the well, or while they're out, you know, visiting, they, you know, have a bit of a gossip. But they used to be able to sort of shed some of their, you know, their pain and their stresses by talking to other women. Men didn't have the opportunity to do that back then. And I think that is passed through. So men, you know, strong men don't cry, all of those, you know, the whole thing around being a man and so on. But I've always encouraged my children to talk, and things like therapy and stuff that nobody talks about, or people don't believe in it, or they worry about what somebody might think. Anybody in our family, you know, extended family, that has an issue, I would say, you know, utilize therapy. You know, go to somebody who's an expert that can help, because it's amazing what it can do. People who are trained to do that, but it's scared, because nobody wants anybody to know that they've been through this. It's important to talk. In my line of work, like, we offer clinical supervision to our staff, because a lot of the people that work in this environment have their own personal experiences, or they know people very close to them that experienced abuse and trauma. So sometimes when you're doing this work, it can trigger those memories as well. So, you know, we provide that specialist therapy to our staff as well. And I think it's really, really important. Anybody who needs that bit of help should access it, because all generations have different types of trauma, but it exists everywhere. Yes, my dad, I know how hard he worked, and he's paying for it now because he's not very well. Because he felt a responsibility. But we always say that my dad, we used to call him Mr. Kanjoos, because he was so tight with his money. But you know what, as I got older, I realised, because he came from a place in India and Punjab where they went hungry when they were young. They didn't have money, you know. So when he came here, it was that thing, save, earn money, save it. Because you never want to experience that feeling of hunger again. And so that was sort of like his trauma. But, you know, kids these days, they have difficult. I know, like, how hard is it to get onto the property ladder, for example? You see people around you, you know, sort of moving on with their life, and you've got a job, but you can't do that anymore, because we're sitting here in the UK and there's a whole issue around, you know, cost of living and so on. So those sorts of things play out for young people. And I think, you know, what Sadish mentioned there about having that space to express, especially accessing support and all that type of thing, you know, looks different for different people.
And if we don't have the conversations in the first place, it'll take us longer to find our voice and the different things that, you know, are there for us to express ourselves. And just to kind of build on that, like, I know, Rav, the work that you do in the creative space, creative expression is one of the most important and fundamental ways that our communities have expressed ourselves across our generations. How does that work for you? Like, what does that look like?
As a creative, I do a million things at once. I recently became a DJ, but another thing I've done in Wolverhampton was we did an exhibition on Punjabi migration journeys. And for me, creatively, like, I think for things to make sense to a lot of people, it makes sense to me when things are chronological, and then it's easier for me to recognize cycles and patterns, and those patterns are similar across different generations. And one of the things that we made sure we did was that it was based on journeys and paying homage to where our people have come from and how far they've come. I made sure that we had a map of Wolverhampton, the rest of the world, and the full Punjab, so people can just put a dot where they're from. And I was fighting back and forth with the people from the art gallery who weren't Punjabi about how big the map needs to be. And the map of Wolves was huge, and the one of Punjab, because they had the full Punjab map, the actual Punjab map was small, and they couldn't understand why I kept saying, no, we need it bigger, until within week one of that exhibition, you couldn't see the map anymore because there were so many dots on there. And I had to explain, like, we've never had a chance to put a dot, you know what, the coordinates in Jalandhar, that's where I'm from. And for even for me to put my stickers down, I'm like, you know what, I feel proud for this. The fact that whoever's come here and however far they've come, I can say, yeah, that's where we're from and that's where we've landed. And I did want to put like a string with a little aeroplane to be like, these are how many miles it took and how many years it took to get there.
An aeroplane.
It wasn't, it was a bunch of different things, yeah.
Russia,
but even that, like my journey alone, I could have put a bunch of dots everywhere and a bunch of strings everywhere, and that would have filled it in itself. But I think a lot of people from different generations, they felt very seen, and we made sure we had like mixed media. We had oral conversations which were taken both in Punjabi and English. Our interviews, we could only put 10 minutes of audio in. The people that we interviewed, one was a 4-hour-long interview because of how long their journey was. The one I did was an hour and a half. I interviewed the Same Singh Sandhu, which was the person who fought for bus drivers to wear their pagga in the UK. And that story alone, just listening to that makes me cry because of the kind of stuff that went into that. But people want to talk, and then photos as well. There was lots of photos that came out of the archives. People from my family went and picked out people that were related to, people who were at their weddings, that were friends. My best friend's Baba's in the photos, and I didn't realise that he was going to come up again, Wolverhampton being tiny. But I think using media, especially music, videos, photography, there's something there. Everyone's got something. We're known to be hoarders, for starters. There's got to be something in the attic somewhere. And just having that out as a visual, it encouraged people to have the conversations within their own families and bring pieces out. Like that little piece of paper I said about my nana's passport that came, that was after I had the conversation and said, this is what I'm doing. What have we got in the family? And that came out like. But and the other thing is, for example, we're pushed to do medical jobs or corporate jobs like everyone is here. But again, coming into imposter syndrome, not all of us are corporate based. Like I did an English degree and now I'm DJing. Where's the connection? But for me, like allowing myself to call myself a creative and taking that permission myself has now allowed other people around me to say, you know what, actually I'm a creative too. Like I do these things. And when it comes to music, for example, there's Punjabi music and we don't know what the lyrics mean, and it's very difficult to translate Punjabi into English directly because the structure of the language is completely different to what we know. But then we're also surrounded by illustrators and people that do comic strips, or YouTubers or people on TikTok, and there's so many ways to actually explain a story, and yet we're stuck at the fact that, Punjabi is not translatable. Like it feels like we find the issue and then there's not actually a way to go over that. But creative arts is a way to kind of push through that, I think.
And I think historically, creative expression has been a way our communities have expressed throughout history.
We're poets.
Whether it's poets, whether it's painting, whether it's oral histories, you know, we've passed knowledge down through talking.
Yep.
You know, my Bibi, she couldn't read or write when she came to the UK. How is it that she learned? Actually, she learned through speaking to people and understanding. And sometimes we almost forget about that, and we need to reconnect with that type of expression.
And I think going back to working with children, there's so much to learn from kids. Like when you're a kid, there's so much you can do. Like the world is at your feet, but then you hit school and you're kind of molded into what they want you to be in society and what you need to be for university or school and stuff. But there's so much that we can learn from children, from just the way that they see things. And intergenerational. Not only are we learning from our forefathers, but they need to learn from us. Like, we've got access to things like Sikh Women's Aid now, and Taraki, and whoever's at the Gurdwara through sports and stuff. Like, it is difficult for them to have to learn things from us and unlearn things, but I think it's us and our generation now to make use of everything that we've got, taking into account that the issues that they did have was based on their context, and we can't take away from that just the same way they can't take away from our seemingly soft issues that we have now. But it's kind of, okay, this is what we've learned, now we're unlearning it. How do we teach it back? How do we have that patience and communication back to kind of allow them to learn from us, even if they do it quietly or unwillingly as well? But yeah.
There's something that I find really powerful about creating that space and that psychological safety to actually talk. And I think when people start talking, I think that's a really good way of processing trauma, processing what you've been through. And coming from a corporate world, you know, sort of, I've had the opportunity to do some coaching, do mentoring, but then how do you sort of take that back in your community? So if I've had the opportunity to look at some coaching, okay, and this is how you should ask questions. I do sit down now, and I think I've been doing it for the last sort of 10 years. You know, sit down with my mum, and you know, we'd sit on the sofa, it's just me and her, cup of tea, and she's comfortable. This is her comfortable space. And then it's just, you know, you ask those questions and you probe and you go back to your sort of, you know, your sort of background and your journey and what it was like. And I do find actually the more we talk about it, the more it's being processed, the more healing is happening. And taking that and I try and do it with my children as well. Like you said, you know, there are things that our parents didn't do with us. They didn't sit down with me after school and say, so how was school today? What did you learn today? And you know, I've got two boys, 8 and 9, and I definitely, you know, try. I want some time with them as well. And again, take that approach, sit down with them, ask them questions, and give them the space and, you know, in an environment that works for them as well, to actually talk about, okay, so how are things with you? You know, how's school and how's life and just generally. But it's taking that. I think there is something so powerful about just talking and actually, you know, doing our bit as well about creating that safety, that psychological safety, to talk to our elders, those who are, you know, younger than us as well, to talk through, you know, what's on their mind, what are they going through, what are they processing, and how can we help them. And sometimes I think it's just listening, isn't it? Just sitting there and just listening is probably the best thing that you can do for them.
And on that, you know, I think one of the biggest, the most important things that I heard from my dad was, you know, we got 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. You know, use it in the ratio that we've got it. You know, listen twice as much as you speak. And I think that skill of being able to listen and ensuring that people feel heard is a really, really underrated skill. Because many conversations, there's so much happening. Sometimes we don't really listen, we don't really hone in. And sometimes people just need a space to be heard. And I think that piece of wisdom that I got kind of from my dad in that sense was something that stuck out to me. And I wonder, you know, for our guest today, what piece of wisdom for you sticks out that you've learnt either from someone older or even someone younger than you?
I think for me, the big one has to be respect. And I think this comes from, again, the community, the upbringing. So growing up, you know, if we come across an elder, you don't address them by name. It's always uncle, auntie. That's always been inbred from the start. And I think that's one of my own personal values, and that lives with me, and I live and breathe that. I think that's a huge one for me. Again, having done, you know, some sort of coaching and trying to understand who I am as a person, that always comes right at the top. It's respect, but I think that respect has come through from my upbringing. And what I've learned from my elders in terms of how you address people.
So we got kind of the understanding of respect and kind of practice of that. Okay. What about for others? What sticks out to you?
Kindness, I think. Kindness is the one thing that I think that is the most powerful thing in the world. When you're kind to someone, and like you said, you listen to their story, listen to their, not necessarily to, you know, listen to kind of get knowledge, but you just listen, just to hear their side of things. I think you give someone hope, and hope is a very powerful thing. My boxing coach, so his name's Martin Bowers, he's one of the most notorious sort of Gora families from Essex. He used to do bank robberies and all this kind of stuff, but when I went to the gym...
Wait, do people know that?
I'm saying, like, he's a notorious gangster. Yeah, so when I went to the gym, I was training somewhere else. I went to the Peacock gym. The Peacock is famous, you know, it's where all the elite fighters have trained. And when my dad asked me on like the second or third day, he said, "Oh, how's it down there? You know, only up and I'm in the gym full of Gurukala, you know, how was it?" And I said, "You know what, Martin?" I said, "He's so nice." And I didn't really understand why he was nice. I didn't know him. I've only heard about him, and everyone knows who he is. And I was like, "Why is he so nice?" You know, he'd be the first one in the gym. He'd be so happy. "Good morning, how you doing? Can I make you a cup of tea?" before training. And I didn't understand. But as I got to know him, I realised he was just genuinely a kind person. And 2-3 years ago, I didn't understand why someone would be so kind. I didn't understand the value of it. Only when I see it through him, you know, how much nimrata he had, how much humility he had within himself, and how it made me a better person, I realised that, you know what, if I was just kind, even if I could be half as kind as he is to the people around me, it could go so far. You know, like I said, again, I always refer back to the kids, just being kind to the kids. And my Taya, he's a head coach, he's very strict, you know, typical strict old boxing coach man, do you know what I mean? I'll be their friend, you know, like I said, and that bit of kindness goes so far. And they come to the gym, come to the Gurdwara to train at the gym, not because they're going to be a boxing champion or because they like boxing, but because they just, for some of them it's an escape, and some they've got a friend in me. And that bit of kindness goes so far, and it's often so overlooked. Like we always say, you know, respect, and, you know, you ask a kid, "What do you want?" You say, "I want money, I want this, I want that." But nobody actually we don't teach our kids kindness. Mm-hmm. We don't teach, you know, we can only give kindness, but if we have it within ourselves, the world is a reflection of ourselves. You know what I mean? And we're often, nobody ever kind of, not to say my parents told me to be a bad person, but nobody told me to be kind. Make sure you're kind to somebody. Make sure you're kind to everyone. You know, growing up, I was a bit of a naughty kid in school and all that kind of stuff. I didn't really realise, you know, it was just normal. Like, I was just a naughty kid. But as I've gone older now, you realise you aren't going to remember me, you know, for what car I drove or what trainers or what watch I've got and all that kind of stuff. But you remember me as an individual, as a person, and how I affected you. And I think that, like I said, kindness is the way to somebody's heart, and it will change the world forever. Like Sanjana Singh, you said, there is no power on earth that can subdue us, because if you are kind and if you speak to people with love and you show them pyar, you don't need to be a bad person. You don't need to force your ideas on nobody. You don't need to force your way of thinking. You don't need to force somebody to do what you want to do or think like you think. Your kindness, and you realise everybody is their own person, but that bit of kindness creates bridges, you know what I mean? And I'm from a different background to you. You know, you guys are all in the corporate world. I've never had a job in my life. But that bit of conversation, you know, we have the same story, but if I don't speak to you guys and you guys don't speak to me, you know, somebody, I'm not going to look at him because he's going to say, he said, when I walked into the building, I didn't really feel like I should have been here. I said to him, but I feel like that about you guys. And I said, you're in a corporate world. He goes, Indra, I'm not. I said, there you go then. I said, it was in my own mind. That was my version of events. I thought everybody here was in the corporate world, that I wasn't going to be good enough. But he said to me, I'm not. I said, there you go then. The same way you thought you're not good enough, I thought I'm not good enough. But I guess my version was a lie. And I said, your version is going to be a lie because you're just as good as I am. And I'm just the same God, the same light that's in me is in you. And it's in everybody here. It's not just, you know, one person has it more, one person has it less. That guru, that light, not just guru, the God, the light is in everybody. And you can only really give someone kindness. That's all they can really take from you. All the other stuff is like I said, it's here today and it's gone tomorrow.
It's beautiful. I think it's exactly what it's something that you can give to people no matter
unconditionally.
What. Unconditionally.
Unconditionally. When you give someone kindness unconditionally, a lot of people think it's fake, think it's just like, you know, a facade, you know, like you're just trying to be someone, you know what I mean? Or you want something from them, or you're weak. But someone who's strong, and again, I learned this from my coach, he has everything. He's got everything. He's got money, he's got a name.
You rob banks, bro.
He's got a lot of money, believe it or not. But he was kind. And I realised that he didn't want nothing from nobody. Nobody could give him anything. And so he was a giver, do you know what I mean? He had a pure heart. Again, forget the bank robbery and stuff, but...
I was going to say again, I was like, I don't know the guy.
Do you know,
also, you probably could find
out
where
it's weird because I shouldn't be saying too much, but when they got found out, it was like a famous story on BBC. Like they bugged the gym or whatever, and one of the things he said, and it was on camp or like recording whatever, it was like, we're not gonna hurt nobody. Like nobody's gonna get hurt. Whatever we're gonna do, we're just gonna take the money or whatever that. Like I said, I don't know the internet, but we're just gonna do that, and nobody's gonna get hurt. But that, again, he done whatever, but it shows what kind of person he is. I'm not saying everybody go rob a bank, but listen.
That's a good, interesting term. We're from unconditional kindness to reminding people that they shouldn't rob banks. But now I respect
that's
that.
life, man. One day it's there, one day you're down there, man.
Yes, I don't know how you follow that, but
it worked for me. I'm joking.
I think, just in case anybody doubts it here, but I am a feminist. So, as a woman, I think, like all our lives we're taught. And growing up in a Sikh family household as well, seva, doing for others. That's what we were always taught. And it's probably why partly I got into this line of work. When I was at school, I wanted to be a police officer, but they had height restrictions then. So 4'11" just doesn't cut it, And obviously they changed that now because they realised it was a discriminatory piece of legislation that you had to be a certain height because you were excluding lots of people. So I always wanted to do something to help people. That was sort of ingrained in me, I guess, being brought up in a household, in a Sikh household, but as women, I think that we're programmed that way as well. We're always told to do for others, your parents, then your husbands, then your children, and so on. And one of the things that I learned through doing this work is that have to look after yourself as well. That's the other thing, because unless you look after yourself, you can't do for others, because you just won't be well enough. So I think that's one of my key messages really is about being kind, like you said, but to yourself as well. Looking after yourselves, being selfish sometimes and saying, I need time for me. Because then if I'm okay, my family's okay, my work's okay, And I'm going to be really cheeky and give you a second one, like I was saying earlier, is get out of your own way. As women, we do this. We always put barriers up. Am I able to? Can I do this? Or I've got my children, I've got to take care of them as well. And it's always the women who end up giving up those dreams and aspirations because there's other things that they need to do first. And I did it for a long time because somebody approached me years ago to do this work with Sikh women because that was my background. They thought, well, she's experienced, she's got the skill, she understands the system. And at the time I said, I can't do it because I've got really young kids. And as they got older, I felt like, now they're able to look after themselves, I can do this. So I did the same thing. But what I would say is that don't put yourself last, because there is so much that you can do, but you can only do it if you look after yourself and you think about your own dreams and aspirations as well as everybody else around you. And I just think that's really important to look after yourself.
No, I think there's so much that we've learned and we can connect with from previous generations, and I think it's important because a lot of the conversations are difficult, but we're only going to move forward with kind of positive wisdom that we're able to learn from those who've come before us, and also from those who are younger than us as well. And really quickly, for me, one of the biggest things that made an impact was when my brother, who's 13 years younger than me, spoke to me about how he listened to someone at school and how he created a space for someone at school to talk to him about his challenges. And they were able to then, talk to the teacher together and that kind of thing. Actually, he said, I've learned that from the work that you do. And, and that for me was just a really nice reminder of how these things, these conversations, we were talking about respect, kindness, self-worth, kind of creativity. We role model them. We will see them making an impact in society more widely. And, we could probably go and sit here for hours and hours talking about various topics around this, but I want us to, leave the audience and people who are listening with one word each. So what is the one word you want to leave people with today?
It's a really difficult one.
It's a difficult one.
Yeah.
I'm going to say community, because if I'd answered that question, it would be about leaning into community, not doing stuff by yourself, because that's what we've learned over and over again.
That's loads of words.
Yeah. But community, yeah.
I'm going to say two, because one don't make sense without the other.
Okay, that's fine.
the idea of being Sawa Lakh.
Okay. Do you want to explain it for people who might not know what that
Yeah,
means?
so Guru Gobind Singh Ji says, Sawa Lakh se ek ladon tabe Gobind Singh naam kaho. That one of my Singhs will fight 125,000, and only then, Sawa Lakh means 125,000, only then will I call myself Guru Gobind Singh Ji. Meaning that we're not going to fight 125,000 people, but we should have that mindset of being ready to fight and stand against the world, even if the whole world might be against us. You know, that's the principle of Sikhi. The whole world might be against us, we might be alien. As long as we're doing the right thing, then we should be ready to stand tall and stand against the world. But, again, one word, Sawa Lakh.
Respect.
Oh God, I think selfless for me, selfless for others, but selfless for yourself as well. Yeah.
I think for me it'll be the ek from Ek Omkar, because ek, I think we are all one. Yes, we're all unique and diverse in so many ways, but I think we're all so similar and we're all one big community. And I think this was just amazing how everyone came together today. Thank you so much for doing this. But yeah, for me it's that one word.
Mine's Prota. But mine is gratitude, really, because I feel that we are all learning from each other and we're all teaching each other at the same time. It's this strange position of being a teacher but also being a student. And for me, you know, as soon as I think I stop learning, that means something's gone wrong in my life, because we should be living every single day learning new things, whether about ourselves, whether about people around us. Being able to draw inspiration from those who've come before us and also those younger than us, you know, ultimately because we want to create the lives in which people are able to thrive. And we're in that position, a lucky position now, where we can move from surviving to thriving. And, you know, we are fortunate to be in that position and fortunate to be able to have conversations like this. So we've come to the end of the discussion today. As I mentioned, you know, we'd be able to talk about this for hours and hours, but I'm really glad we had an opportunity to talk about intergenerational trauma at the start, which was, you know, deep, challenging conversations, right? But we were able to end it on something hopeful and optimistic. You know, and there's many questions that people might have, further questions that people might have, but, you know, I'll leave us with a quick reflection about just a really quick thing about my Nana Ji, who was a really quiet but very assured guy. And I learned from him the importance of being strong and being gentle at the same time. And I think that type of experience kind of pulls together a lot of the discussions we've been having, because we have an opportunity to do things differently. We have an opportunity to set our future up positively for ourselves, our families, our communities more widely. And we have all of the pieces of the jigsaw in front of us. It's just about picking it up and doing it. And so, you know, thank you all for being a part of the conversation today. You know, people absolutely should kind of check out Sikh Women's Aid and the work that Shadish does. Check out, see his next fight. I don't know. When's the next fight?
Next month.
Is there any exclusive information you can give to us that I may or may not tell other people? I was joking, don't worry. Perfect. And then anything on, watch out for Rav on the decks, isn't it?
And we've also got Dunya in the Midlands that we started talking about music and having communal conversations about that and linking it to multiple different things as well.
Absolutely.
Yep.
And Bal, anything to look forward to on your side?
No, nothing else that really particularly stands out.
Deloitte Sikh Network?
Deloitte Sikh Network, yes. Yeah, amazing. Yeah, they're doing an amazing job.
Fantastic. Well, thank you all for being a part of the conversation today. And, you know, I'm sure the conversations will continue. And I'll hand it back to Deloitte Sikh Network. A round of applause for all the guests.